Okay. Well, I'll hold it closer. First of all, thank you everybody for coming. This is Edina's 9th annual Days of Remembrance. This is also ironically the first day of the National Days of Remembrance, and it's a week and beyond that of when we remember the victims and honor the survivors. Again, this is our 9th year. We will be, can you hear? I can talk louder. Maybe if I also bring it closer, much louder. Okay, and if our guys are hearing us, if they can make it louder too. I'll talk louder. Okay, so again, thank you for coming. Our 9th year, we will be having 3 people speaking today. Mayor Hovland will be introducing the event. Henning Schroeder, a professor at the University of Minnesota, will be talking about the beginnings of the Holocaust, what the climate was in Germany and France, and signs that we could look for during a Holocaust or a genocide. We've learned before that signs are there, we don't always know them or pay attention to them, and that's what this event is all about. I wanted to just, this is a quote from Mayor Hovland that he mentioned that I thought was appropriate for today. And he said that acting on our beliefs requires facing danger and not fearing it. That's something that you'll be hearing, I believe, probably from Professor Henning and also Louise, about not giving in to evil, about not bullying and treating people fairly. So again, I'm going to, if everyone would just join me in welcoming Mayor Hovland.
Thank you, Jen. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the biggest crowd we've had in 9 years. And you know, when this started on a national basis 9 years ago, we thought we should be participating in this too. But as time has gone on in the Twin Cities, our Human Rights and Relations Commission and our city council over the years has been the only city, I believe, in the metro area that has continued this annual tradition of getting together, getting our residents together, having people come together to honor the things that Jan talked about and to remember what happened during the Holocaust. So before I talk a little bit about the subject matter of the day, I got a call on the way here, and this falls into the really good news category. As some of you may know that live in Edina, our school district has been under attack from the Center for the American Experience, I think. And you know, during the years I've been the mayor, I find truth and some value in every opinion that I hear. And you have to figure out how it works into you making a final decision on something. But there's value in everything. And there may be value in this article that was written for the 2nd time in 2 years by the same person who happens to be a resident of our community. But I wanted to point out to you that I just got a call from a guy up in northern Minnesota named Russ Anderson, who was coming back. They were doing a parade in Greenbush Middle River for their robotics team. Their robotics team was in the top 5 in the world at the Detroit World Contest this past weekend, and there were 5 teams from Minnesota in those finals. So it was extraordinary. I don't know how many were finalists totally, but Edina, he called me because he wanted to tell me that Edina won the World Chairman's Award in robotics. It's the most prestigious award you can win in the field of robotics. And he said, this is far better than having the best robot. This is something that tells you that your kids are reaching out to other teams to try to make them better, that they're reaching out to talk about STEM and the benefits of STEM. It's an extraordinarily prestigious award. And so he just wanted to let us know and try to help us figure out a way to vet those kids tonight. Well, of course, it's easier to get a fire truck out in front of the bus coming back into town to Middle River than it is in Edina. So I don't know what we'll be able to do tonight when that bus comes back from Detroit with these kids on it, but we should all remember that our kids are just fantastic over in our entire school system. Our teachers are great. If there's some issues that we need to address, we'll address them. But I can tell you that from my experience working with the school district, what they've always tried to do is lead. Just like we're trying to do here with this topic today. They've tried to lead, and sometimes when you're leading, and you go beyond to lead into a new area like personalized learning to try to prepare kids for 21st century living and learning, you may stumble once in a while. And if we stumble, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. So that's the good news of the day. The next thing I want to talk about is I know that they had a beautiful article about Louise in the Sun Current. And it was, the theme of it was stand up to evil. And I think you're going to talk a little bit about that today. And it caused me to think about this in the context of what we have going on in the world today. And it made me think about demagogic behavior. And so that also caused me to think about, well, what is the broad definition of a demagogue? And what do we need to be worried about here in our own country? And I'm trying not to be political about this. I'm just trying to be observational. A demagogue is a political leader who exploits the prejudices of ordinary people, whips up the crowd, shuts down reason, overturns established norms of political conduct, uses false claims and promise. So for all of us, I think we need to be mindful of how we walk on this earth. Not only that's not an environmental pitch. That's a living pitch. How do we behave as human beings? And here's what you need to worry about, at least what I worry about with a demagogue, is that the demagogue is someone who potentially leads you on the pathway to hate. And the first step is creating divisiveness amongst people and making them think they've got more differences than they do similarities. And the differences, the divisiveness, the discord can eventually lead to some really bad things in terms of behavior and human conduct. We don't want to go there. And so we have meetings like this. We have people coming, I think, from probably all over the Twin Cities today to think about what happened in the past to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So don't let anybody take us down that pathway to hate. We don't want to go down that hate, because as Louise is going to talk about, you need to stand up to evil. I don't know if I necessarily like talking about it in biblical sort of terms, but I think that there are things that we should staunch and stop and make sure that people know that we think we have more going on for ourselves together than we do separately, and that one person's view of the world isn't necessarily the right view of the world. Because my time as a local elected official, I feel it's very complex. And as you go about making decisions, you have to factor in the thoughts of everybody and trying to figure out a pathway forward. So never forget about the common good, and don't let anything out there divide us. And I know I'm preaching to the choir today. That's why you're all here. But I think it's a lesson well learned. So I'm going to have Jan come back up, and we're going to go on through the program here. So thanks for bearing with me a little bit today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want us all to think about those words while we listen to Henning and Louise today, about standing up for each other, about doing the right thing, about not bullying other people, about being respectful. And that's what this is about. So I'd like all of us now to welcome Henning Schroeder, professor of University of Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you for having me here today to share a few thoughts with you about what led to the Holocaust. I grew up in West Germany in the 60s and 70s in a mid-sized town close to Cologne and Düsseldorf. And the Holocaust, Nazi Germany, the rise of Hitler, what led to it, what was changed in the West German constitution to prevent it from happening again was a big chunk of our curriculum throughout the 70s, the 60s, not so much, the 70s. And we all thought, well, the archives are open, the facts are there, everybody knows how horrible nationalism is, this is not going to happen again. Boy, were we wrong. My parents were not so optimistic as we were growing up in the 70s. My parents grew up in the 30s, and my mother used to tell a story. She was about 11 or 12 years old, 1941, 1942, in my hometown. She is in a bakery, and a neighbor of hers that she knows quite well, a Jewish man, all of a sudden, from one day to the next, has to stand back in the bakery at the very end, has to wait until everybody else is served, and wears this gigantic yellow Star of David that says Judah on it. And my mother, 11, 12 years old, asked the adults, so what is that about? Why does Sally Cohen, that was his name, why is he not served? And the answer she gets is, well, that's the law. That's the new law. So the children recognized intuitively something is fundamentally wrong, but the adults were hiding behind what was called law, Nazi legislation, essentially. And not only that, they were also benefiting from it because Sally Cohen owned a textile and department store. And the Nazis took it away from him and sold it for very little money to one of his non-Jewish competitors in my hometown. And when they disappeared, Sally and Beate, his wife, from one day to the next, the official story was they've been resettled to the east, when in truth they were murdered, deported, and then murdered in Theresienstadt and Auschwitz. And today there's only, his story is online actually now, in German unfortunately, but in front of his house are two stumbling stones for him and his wife. And we honestly thought, well, people are not going to fall for that kind of propaganda again when we went to school. And as you can tell by the horrible events yesterday, we were really too optimistic at that time. What led to that? How is that possible in the middle of the 20th, or not in the middle, but in the 20th century? Particularly when you think about the fact that at the beginning of the 19th century, and don't be scared, I can do a century in 5 minutes, when at the beginning of the 19th century, things looked really promising for Jews and Christians and living together. It was the age of enlightenment. People put more emphasis on reason than religion. Your prime identity, to speak in today's terms, was being a human being. And people weren't focusing so much on what was dividing them as Christians or as Jews. And the French, under these circumstances, were the first to grant full citizenship, equal rights to the Jews during the French Revolution. It was a very modern thing. You could basically choose in some ways your citizenship as long as you adhere to the principles of the Republic. Equality, liberty, fraternity. The Germans, not so much. For them, citizenship, which was just emerging, had always more to do with blood, with genes, although genes weren't known at that time. And it was born out of fighting the French and beating Napoleon. It was always a patriotism that was more exclusive and not inclusive like it was in France in the early 19th century. It was not a child of enlightenment. It was a child of romanticism, the German idea of a nation. And that meant it was emphasizing the uniqueness of the German race, the German nation. Things like that happened as early as the 19th century. This is why, in order to answer the question what led to it, we have to go back a little further. However, 80 years later, 1871, the German Empire does the same as the French Revolution, giving Jews full citizenship, no more restrictions in terms of what jobs they can have or not have. And it looks good. 2 years later, the Great Depression happens. It was called Great Depression back then because the real one in the 1930s hadn't happened yet. In 1873, a global crash happens, economic crash happens, not because of real estate, but it was a railroad bubble, both in Germany, other countries in Europe, and also in the US. And it is blamed, mostly in Germany and Austria, on Jewish financiers, on a network that doesn't exist, but people sort of believe that it's due to a conspiracy. It's the same thing that we're hearing right now. It's a conspiracy theory, and it is also beefed up by fake science. Fake science. A couple of years later, a person named Wilhelm Marr, I have to read that now, a German journalist, publishes a book, The Way to Victory of Germanism over Judaism. It's no longer about theology or Christians and Jews and who believes what. It is now about two races against each other. So it is no longer religion, it is really about Aryans and Semites. Wilhelm Marr comes up with the term anti-Semitism in 1879 to give it some sort of scientific cachet or luster that is not true. Those are terms that are strictly coming from language studies, from linguistics. There is no Aryan race, there is no Semitic race. Those are terms to denote languages, and even those terms are no longer really valid. But they're being abused, and the news is spread. This book becomes a bestseller. In 1 year, it goes through 11 editions. If there was Facebook or Twitter, Wilhelm Marr would have had lots of friends and followers at that time. And anti-Semitism becomes socially acceptable. Through all of society, all layers, the highly educated, the poorly educated, the rich, the poor, not everybody is an anti-Semite, but it is totally okay to be one. And I think this is the problem that from that time on is in Germany, also in other countries, but mostly in Germany, something that really poisons society. So basically the ground was prepared for the next economic crisis in 1930, 1929, which led to the real Great Depression. And after that, they called the 1873 one the Panic of 1873. But in 1929, the stock market crashes, as you all know. In Germany, 30% unemployment. Germany has had 10 years that were horrible. Most of them hyperinflation after World War I. Democracy, which was introduced after World War I for Germans, equates with misery in terms of life or humiliation. And they're looking for somebody to rescue them, or a strong man, because the democratic system to them doesn't really seem to cut it. So Hitler's party in 1928 has 2.8% at the federal election. 2.8%, nothing. Within 4 years after the crash, it goes up to 33% or 37% in another election. So it's a super fast rise. He promises everything to everybody, but what he does, he blends anti-Semitism with anti-communism. Everybody in Western Europe is scared of the Soviet Union, which at that point has existed for about 10 years. Everybody thinks they're going to export the revolution, overthrow all democratic governments in the West. So somebody who's a strong man and who can defend, and he portrays himself as the savior of Europe, who can defend us against communism is probably a good choice. Big business, industry, they think that too, and they support Hitler. Not everybody, but his campaign actually manages to get support, not just from business, but also from other parties. He only has 30%, 33%. He can't form a government. So there are conservative circles in Germany, and actually also in France later on, that think, well, let's support him. We can manage him. Actually, one of the conservative politicians said, well, we can manage that clown. We just hire him, and he will get us the votes. Within 6 months after he gets appointed, he has turned Germany into a full-blown dictatorship. People are thrown into prison. The first pogrom-like actions are taken against the Jews, goes all the way to the race laws from Nuremberg, and the rest is history. But the ground was prepared over 200 years and longer of sort of building up that message that went from anti-religion to basically racist portrayal of Jews. Before I finish, let me just say 2 words about the 2 big churches in Germany. You would expect that the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church would have been in opposition to Hitler at the time when he only had 30% of the vote, and would have been up in arms when he throws people into prison and erects a brutal terror regime. Well, not so much. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, within 6 months after Hitler is in power, strikes an agreement with him, an agreement of tolerance and non-interference, the so-called Concordat, which is still in place actually today, which means that as long as the Catholic Church doesn't interfere with whatever the Nazis are doing, Hitler guarantees all the rights of the Catholic Church in the German Reich. How about the Protestants? The Protestant Church, since the Reformation, has preached obedience not just to God, but also to your worldly government. And the worldly government is Adolf Hitler. And the Nazis love Martin Luther. I'm just bringing that up because I worked for 10 years at a place called Martin Luther University in Halle-Wittenberg. The place isn't named after him because he taught there in the 16th century. The university was named after Martin Luther in November 1933 with approval of the Nazis. Why? Because Martin Luther wrote some really nasty, violent things towards the end of his life against the Jews, and he published it. He advocated for burning down their synagogues, taking away their property, putting them in labor camps, and eventually even, maybe we have to kill them too. That's in a book called About the Lies of the Jews. Why did he do that? He was personally offended that the Jews didn't want to convert in masses to the new religion that he started. People say, well, he wasn't a racist. It was all for theological reasons and arguments. Had they converted, it would have been all okay. But I ask you, as a victim, would you say, oh, I'm so glad you're killing me of theological reasons and not because you're racist? So that argument finally has also been abandoned by the Protestant Church, and they apologized 2 years ago upon the 500th anniversary of the Reformation for that. Let me just end on one note. If you call for violence publicly, as Martin Luther did, chances are somebody is going to listen, and somebody is going to act upon it, even if it takes 400 years, as in Luther's case. In most cases today, it goes much quicker than that. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Okay, but now it is. All right. I was thinking, thank you very much, Henning, for telling us the information of starting of the Holocaust. And we're learning it wasn't just 1930s, it was 100 to 200 years earlier, and we just didn't know it at the time. And with social media now, we hopefully know things earlier, sooner, and take advantage of it. Before I call up Louise, I wanted to also set the story for Paris. So Paris had 130,000 Jewish residents at the time in Paris in 1940. Between 1941 and 1945, 78,000 Jewish men, women, children were sent to the Holocaust camps. A quarter of the population were sent to the camps. At the end of the war in 1945, 2,000, that's it, 2,000 French people survived the camps. Trying to get rid of an entire race. That's what it is. I want to now have you all welcome Louise Dillery. Yes, come on up.
Am I on? You are on. Oh my goodness. I feel like the Queen of England here.
No, it's on.
It's on.
It's on.
Can you hear me? And I talk loud enough. No, I'm a big mouth. So usually I can just boom. I hope everybody can hear me, okay? Not that I'm that important to listen, but as long as I'm sitting here.
So why don't you use both?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that.
Oh, is this on?
I think it is now, yes. No, it's on.
It's on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, boy. No, aren't you lucky? They can hear me. Okay. Well, you know, first of all, I'm awed and deeply, deeply touched by the fact that your community cares enough to have a special day like this. You know, that's not everywhere or everybody, and it makes my heart feel good, because lately I've been a little depressed, well, more than depressed, because there's definitely a renewal, a revival of anti-Semitism and any racism, anything in the world. And to see people like you who obviously fight it, are ready to fight it, you don't have no idea how much it touches me. It touched me, I could almost cry with gratitude to think that people like you who care so much, because there's really definitely a revival of anti-Semitism, and it scares me, because I thought we had come over, everybody learned, improved, but evil is so strong in the world, doesn't it? It's just, it keeps, no matter how much you try, you have to fight evil. And now I'm at the point, especially when I talk to young people, I said, don't be too polite, damn it, anyway. I mean, the time has come to stand up. And if you hear anything wrong, evil, don't just smile and think, stand up. If it's too dangerous for your job or your whatever situation, you cannot always stand up to evil as much as you'd like to. I'm not asking anybody to risk their lives or their jobs, but from now on, especially young people, I said, you, I don't have to, but to show your displeasure, to show even just with your eyes, stare at the person who has said nasty stuff. Oh my goodness, I'm up there. Oh my goodness. Better pan it. I don't know if my makeup is okay or what.
Why don't you tell them a little bit about who you are and what life was like in Paris during the Holocaust?
Yeah, so I can really, people call me a Holocaust survivor, and I always used to say to group when I talked, no, I survived, I was not sent to a concentration camp like my dear father and other good people that I knew. But a man, after I talked like that, scolded me real hard and said, don't you dare say that you're not a Holocaust survivor. You are. So, all right, if that's what it is. I'm willing to be called that. I don't care. Whatever it is, survivor is a nice word anyway, isn't it? Jeez. But you know, that's not due to me, because you are facing now a real wet noodle. Yeah, you don't believe it. I have no courage on my own. On my own, I'm really a wet noodle. But I have survived thanks to what I call my angels in human form. I've been blessed all my life from the time I had suffering when I lost my mother at age 13, before the war that was. And I would never have survived. I swear to you, I would not have survived. But people were there, so I still believe no matter what, there are more good people in the world than bad people. Otherwise, I don't think we would have survived this long.
Can I ask you a question,
Yeah.
please? What was happening to you?
We're going to have.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Questions.
I don't mind if you ask me now. But
Okay.
anyway, I better start talking about my life, huh?
Right, yes.
Because otherwise I'm going to...
Thank you. Right. So
Okay.
especially, I guess we talked about with your dad, right,
Yeah.
when you were at home.
Yeah, so I'll start. I was born in Paris of, well, that makes me kind of glamorous, huh? No? I was born in Paris, huh? But my parents were not. I want to tell you that I already come from a background of persecution. My mother came to Paris from Warsaw because she knew French beautifully already, and she was traumatized because her father had been beaten up so badly in Warsaw one time during a pogrom. Some people might not know what the word pogrom means, but it's a special word for the harassment and persecution of Jews. So her wonderful father died the day after being so badly beaten up during a pogrom that she just couldn't stand to stay in Warsaw. So she came to Paris and made a life for herself there. My father came from Lodz in Poland, and the reason he came to Paris was because at that time Poland was occupied by the Russians, and the Russians were known for every so often, maybe when I had too much vodka in the nose, I don't know, whenever, or it was condoned by the government, they raided the Jewish homes and took the boys of the homes as young as 14. Can you imagine a boy 14 is still so tender and attached and needing his family, right? So anyway, so there were always good people who were there to warn the Jewish families. So the 14-year-old boys of the Jewish families as young as 14 would leave home in order not to be taken. That's how my dear, wonderful, sweet father left his home in Lodz in Poland to come to Paris at age 14. You know, I have 3 sons, and I know what they were like at age 14, and even now, they're very, well, anyway, he's going to be mad at me for that. So that's the way why my wonderful dear father came to Paris, and that's how they met in Paris. They got married, and what do you know? I was born. That's how it happens, when people get married. Well, anyway.
What was life like?
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to get to that. Life was fine until all of a sudden we heard the name Hitler. Everybody thought, oh, those poor countries, Czechoslovakia, that are occupied, but then he'll never occupy France. France, cannot touch France. Well, when they invaded Belgium next door, then everybody got scared, and people left Paris like crazy to go in the country where they knew people. My father and I were alone. My mother had died, from TB before the war. So we stayed in Paris, and they came in. And the one thing I like to share, the experience that still chokes me up every time, when the neighbors said, okay, they're here. That meant the Nazis, the Germans, So instinctively, my father and I went towards the city hall in Paris, walked and just in time to see everybody with their nose up in the air. So naturally, we looked up too. And we looked just at the time where the French flag was coming down. My father grabbed my hand And then that awful swastika went up like a snake, you know, going up. I had my only time I'd seen my father cry when my mother died. And to see tears on my sweet, dear father's face, you know, I don't know what was harder to me, seeing that damp, icky, dirty flag going up there, or the tears on my father's cheeks. But he squeezed my hand, and it's a memory that I relive when I talk about it. It just grabs me in the throat, you know. I'm sure you understand. So right away, my goodness, everybody was impressed because they were not brute Huns. They were gentlemen. They were very nice, very proper. And so everybody thought, well, that's a propaganda, we've been told. The real enemies are not the Germans, they're the English, you know, the English. And people can be led by the nose so easily, you know. I've always told my students, my own children, when my mother taught me, don't be a sheep, think for yourself. Don't assume that what they say is the truth. It is not. Think for yourself, follow your heart. Right? Right. So we didn't, and besides, when you make the mistake of being born Jewish, you automatically look over your shoulder. Yeah, you know, you have enough centuries of persecution, you know, to know better. So right away you think, you look over your shoulder and you start worrying. So anyway, so they came, everything seemed okay, and then, right away, in no time at all, if you were Jewish, you were supposed to go to the mairie, the town hall of your arrondissement, you know, ours was the 4th. There you were supposed to get a yellow, you know, for many years I could not talk about the yellow star because the humiliation was so deep. But now the last couple years or so, I'm forcing myself, even though it hurts so bad. The humiliation is so deep. It's a scar that never heals. Although I've made it a life, you know, I figure I've had this successful life, I cannot complain, but that wound is an open wound that never heals when you're humiliated. When I talk to young people especially, I'd say, please don't even tease. I know sometimes you tease gently, you think, but you never know. You must not humiliate. Don't ever, ever humiliate anybody. That's the worst wound you can inflict on anyone.
And Louise, when the flag came down, what did you and your dad do?
Well, we were numb. We went home, we thought it was a nightmare, you know. We just didn't think, nothing much happened. But then in no time at all, if you were Jewish, you were told to go to the city hall and get your yellow star and get your all the restrictions. We were not allowed to go to a park or a museum or to movies, to theaters. And my lycée, my school, you know what a lycée is? It's a special secondary school that prepares you for the university. The director was not allowed to have Jewish girls among the students. And she, bless her soul, oh, I hope she's in heaven, she risked her life, literally, but she had several of us little Jewish girls in school, and we were able to go on with our studies to the last year of the baccalaureate, which, anyway. So I tell you, there have been such angels in my life I couldn't begin to say. But so somehow we made it. And then one day, my dear, wonderful father had bad stomach ulcers. And he was sick in bed. He hadn't gone to work. He worked in a factory. After having had his own business as a locksmith, he had ended up working in a factory. Oh, that's a long story. So he was so sick in bed with his stomach ulcers. It was the day to get the ration coupons for the month. And so I had to take his card along with mine to go to get the Russian ticket. So two guys, I like to call them bastards. I don't think they were men, they were bastards. If you don't mind my bad English, I don't care. At my age, I'm allowed to say bad words as long as they're not dirty. It's not dirty, but they were bastards, that's all I can tell you. They saw me holding those two cards, so they followed me. And when I realized I was followed, I panicked like a deer or something.
Well, you were.
I went, yeah.
How old were you?
I was 16.
Right.
So, you know, I was so young, panicky, and I've never been one to think fast on my feet, unfortunately. So they followed me. They saw my dear, wonderful father in bed. They forced him out of bed. And they should have taken me too, you know, because in those days, they took whole families. Why is one of the mysteries of my life? Why did they not take me along with my father? I stood there like a statue. They didn't even look at me. And a young man who was deported at the same time as my father came back. Some of them came back. It was real rare after the liberation. And he looked me up and he said, if it can be some kind of consolation to you, I can tell you, your father died right away. And it was a little bit. But you know how they died? They died standing up in cattle cars, without water, how can human beings can be so cruel to other human beings? I will never understand. Can you? No, we cannot understand, can we? It's just so inconceivable, the cruelty to take a man out of his sick bed. Anyway.
And Louise, what did you do
Well,
when he was taken away?
I found myself alone there at age 16, and that's when immediately some good people came to me and said, go see Father so-and-so, Father DeVaux. I hope there's a special place in heaven for him. He said he gave me money. He even gave me a false identification card, which I did not use. But he said, come every month, same day, same time, same place. And he gave me money enough that I could pay the rent and stay there at age 16. And then my friends, especially my wonderful friend Jeanette, that I talk to every Saturday in Paris. She's getting old like me, but she's still there. So, and people just opened their arms, their homes to me, and I could stay in my apartment, which wasn't much, I tell you, but anyway, at least I was there by myself. It's a miracle that I survived like that. And the miracle is my angels in human form. There's no other explanation. I don't know. If you ask me, I don't know how I survived. When you think that any day you can be arrested, you know, once in a while, I knew a nice man who worked at the prefecture of the police headquarters, and I don't know how I am, whatever. And he would come, because I had no phone, you know. He would come at the end of the day, would say to me, if I were you, I would not stay home tonight. He knew that there would be a raid on homes and I could have be taken away. So I went to Jeanette's apartment, her parents' apartment. I had my pajamas and my toothbrush there in permanence. And I didn't have a phone, but I just said, well, okay, and I don't know, it's almost funny in a way how I survived like that. And and wearing that yellow star, you know, I just cannot talk about it. It's too humiliating. But you know, and I don't have to dwell on it. So somehow, I don't know. And then my wonderful principal, my school, you know, my lycée, where she was not allowed to have Jewish girls. And she had me along with others, and some of them were caught and deported. When last time I went to Paris, I went to the main room. There's a plaque on the wall, and I thought that one girl was in my class. Oh, she was so cute and smart and beautiful, everything. And I thought she was the only one who was deported from my school. But on that plaque there, it says, oh, quite a few of them on my lycée. And my friend there, my classmate, she was so adorable. The reason she was caught, her father had given money to a man to cross them up, because you know, the northern part of France was occupied, and there was a line, and the southern part of France was supposedly free, you know. So this man took the father's money to get them across to the free zone, and when they crossed the line, he got money from the Gestapo. Double bonus, you know, good deal, huh? My good money. And they were caught and deported, the whole family. The father, mother, my friend Esther, and her sister never came back. So it's stories like that. Well, that's why the fact that I survived thanks to people who helped me is just so amazing, you know.
So you survived for how many years on your own? Do you remember?
4 years.
4 years on your own.
4 years of occupation. And then, we heard that the Allies, Americans, all the blessed Americans, and Canadians, and had landed, you know. So we thought, you know, Normandy is not far from Paris. So, well, they didn't show up. So we thought that was just a rumor. And one day, lo and behold, the Americans came in, and oh my God, you've never seen such gorgeous people. They were such gorgeous men, those Americans, I can't tell you. Their big smiles. Oh, each one could have been a movie star. That's all. I'm not exaggerating. I asked Jeanette on the phone one day, you know, I said, when I talk to group, and I keep talking about the gorgeous Americans who came in to liberate us, and she said, well, yeah, they were. She agrees with me, so I'm not crazy. Those guys were gorgeous, period.
Do you remember what was the first thing that you did when liberation came to France?
Oh, my God. I think Jeanette and I came rushing out of I was there in their apartment, her parents' apartment with her, because it was a week of fighting in the streets and everything. I could not have stayed home in my apartment.
And was your friend, was she Jewish or not Jewish?
Her father was.
Her father was Jewish?
Yeah, her name was Levi.
Okay.
Her mother was not. Her father never went to get the Yellow Star or anything. He stayed in the apartment for the 4 years without moving.
So there is a movie that was recently out in Edina called The Invisibles.
Yeah.
And the Invisibles are people, Jewish people, that decided not to leave Paris or France because they were French nationalists or civilians. So they stayed, but they needed to become invisible. So they either dyed their hair blonde.
Well, like my Jeanette's father, he stayed in the apartment for the 4 years. He never went to get declared. I don't know.
The coupons or the rations, so he wouldn't be going outside at all.
No. But his wife, she was wonderful. She was not Jewish, and she ran a little business on her own and managed to survive the family. And, you know, some people are so saintly, so holy, so wonderful. Oh.
So in the beginning, that husband would have been safe because he was married to a non-Jewish person.
Well,
But towards the end of the war, it was no longer safe.
as soon as we were occupied, you were a dirty Jew, period, that's all, you know.
So people either if they chose not to put the stars on and other people knew about it, they would also be sent away.
Yeah.
So it was a very dangerous situation he was in.
Yeah.
The wife obviously would be going in and out,
Yeah.
not being
And
Jewish,
you-
but
yeah.
he would have to stay home all the time.
And
So
walking around, if you'd been caught going in a little park or in a museum or a movie, well, you would have been arrested. I was too chicken, I would never tried. But some people maybe tried some. Oh, and in the subway, we were nuts. In this good old Paris subway, we had to go in the last car of the subway in case we would have contaminated, you know, the air for the other people. You never know. Could have.
So the Allies come into town, and
oh.
what happens?
Oh, God, they were gorgeous.
Okay.
You don't know. I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. Those guys were gorgeous.
Well, what were the first things? What were the first things they did when they came into town?
Everybody walked up and they threw out chocolate and goodies, and I was standing there with and one soldier on a big truck, you know, he bent way down. I thought he was going to fall over. He saw that I didn't have my hand up like that, and he almost fell, giving me some candy bar, because he saw that he saw me not trying to get anything, just, you know. And then in no time at all, I got a job with the American Army in an Army hospital, the dental clinic. I was secretary receptionist, and all those GS, they treated me like a princess. They were, you know, they were real gentlemen. Who is the guy who wrote a book or something about the GIs during World War II were the real...
I know, but if we think about it, we will
I can't think.
tell
Can
people.
you
That's okay.
Some guy wrote something about the... I'm here to tell you, they were gentlemen. I was supposed to be guiding them to Paris. I was as much of a tourist as they were. But anyway, thanks to them, I went to the opera, where I could not have gone for 4 years. I went to, they had dances, and I could dance. Those guys could, it was wonderful. I danced, how many of you know how to jitterbug? Yeah. I'd give anything. I'd take any man here who can jitterbug.
So you get a job after the war.
I got a job.
And how long were you there?
I was with the American Army until they left.
Okay, and then what?
One after that, I have, then my immediate boss in the dental clinic where I worked was the son of a family in St. Paul. And his mother could read and write French, but she couldn't speak. So we corresponded, and no time at all, they invited me to come to good old Minnesota. I love Minnesota. I really do. I mean it. So as long as I had a visa, you know, I could stay here as long as I wanted. So I had a big plan, 5 years. I was going to work, travel, save money, get rich, because everybody's rich in America, right? Yeah. And then I was going to go back to Paris. It was 16 years, I think, before I went back to, was it? Paul, do you remember? I don't know. No, it was a long time before I went back.
So when you were here, you started working as a French teacher?
Let's see. When I was here, because I was, a young woman who was a graduate of St. Catherine's and was working there, invited me to visit because the nuns at St. Catherine's were an order of French origin, and they were very, very, they were ahead of their times. That was not. And so when she introduced me to Sister Mary Philip, may she rest in peace, she was the head of the French department, and she just knew that I had my baccalaureate from France, that's my degree. Immediately, she said, come in the fall, and you can take any course you want. You can be a junior with your degree, and in exchange, you just have a French conversation class. She gave me a diamond on a silver platter, that woman did. Can you imagine? You know enough, some of you, about St. Catherine's is not the cheapest place to study, you know. Can you imagine that? I've been so damn lucky in my life. I've got those angels. I can't believe. Every day.
Are there other angels or people that you want to remember, or?
I'm afraid I haven't done enough. All I do is open my big mouth and talk. Well, if that helps, I'm glad. But I feel guilty that I haven't done enough for all the blessing I've had.
Louise, you've
and my
spoken.
children are my blessings.
You've spoken at schools.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So you've
I speak to groups and young people. And now to young people, I always say, stand up to evil. Enough of this business of being polite and smiling. If you hear somebody saying a nasty joke, anti-Semitic or racist or anything, don't even smile. If you can, speak up without risking your job or your life, whatever. Go ahead, speak up. Don't be afraid. But if it's a little risky, don't smile, don't laugh. Just stare at that person's eyes. You can do a lot with your eyes, huh? You know? And they'll know. But stand up. Stand up to evil somehow, some way. Enough of this business of being polite and proper and no, the hell with it. That's finished. Now we're in a time where we have to stand up to evil, right? Yes. And now, you know what breaks my heart is that anti-Semitism is alive and well. There've been, I don't have to tell you, you're informed. There've been terrible things happening, and it really breaks my heart. I'm afraid, I'm really afraid of anti-Semitism coming back so well, so strong. There have been terrible cases. So we have to fight as much as we can, please. And not accept, not just be polite. Enough of that polite business, right? Right? Right.
Well, we also want people to be respectful.
Well, of course.
Right?
Okay. Of course. You know, respect is something it should be automatic as human beings. Although, frankly, I cannot respect evil. Like the two bastards who took my father. Did I tell you they
You
were?
did. So,
don't ask me to respect those two bastards. Nowhere.
Before we finish, is there, and you've given us a lot to think about, is there one last thing you'd like to say for us to, before we'll have questions too, but before...
Do you have questions?
No, we will, but before we have questions, is there
before
one...
you question, I just want to thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're such beautiful people, beautiful souls. You know, you care so much. I cannot tell you how much that touches me. You have no idea. Especially now, since lately I've been a little discouraged over the events. And to see good people like, oh, God bless you all. You're so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. You have question? If you have question,
I was going to say,
I'm an open book.
I'm going to borrow that for a second. I don't think this one is working at the moment.
It's not working.
I don't think mine is. Okay,
Ask me
so
anything. I'm an open book.
before we get to it, I want to just say several announcements that I had forgotten. In your programs or surveys, it asks you where you heard about this event and any suggestions you might have for future either speakers or events related to Days of Remembrance. Don't forget to fill it out, and there's a chair that should be by the front door, and you can put it there. Also, if you haven't already seen out in the hallway, we have Holocaust books that you can that you can take a look at. Take a picture on your phone if you want, so you can order it from Amazon.
You do that every year.
Yes.
I admire you as a community that you do that. I don't think it's done everywhere. You know, you should be very proud of yourselves. You know that?
I'd also like to thank, by the way, Leanne French Amara. She is a French teacher. I don't know if she's here at the moment.
Where is a French teacher?
Is Leanne here?
You're a French teacher?
I'm not a French teacher.
Wait.
I'm an art teacher at a French immersion school.
Okay.
Do you have questions?
Okay, no. So I wanted to thank Leanne, who's unfortunately not here, but there is art outside. She is here? Oh, you are Leanne. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, okay. Then let me, Leanne, thank you. Leanne worked with 4th and 5th graders at Normandale French Immersion School, and their art is sitting out there. So they were learning about the Holocaust. They're learning about.
Students over there?
There are some of their art that's out there. So please take a look. They put in a
so
lot of time and
impressed.
effort. Oh,
Do you have questions?
maybe
Ask me.
we're going to get to the questions. I also want to thank I know that the Human Rights Commissioners are here. If they would like to stand up, by the way, and just
where?
introduce themselves. We have Pat Arsenal over here. We have several. We have Jim back there. We also, I understand, have Melissa Franzen here.
Oh, my
Is
goodness.
she? State Senator. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Bless you. God bless you.
What I'd like to do next also is, now it's time for questions and answers. We're going to have a colleague take the microphone to you so that you can ask
because I
questions.
can't very
Also, Henning is available here.
it on
Also,
so
our
I can,
professor.
this
It is
is
on, yes.
Ask me anything.
Wait, so here.
I'm an open book and a big mouth. So between the two, you know.
Hi, first of all, thank you, of course, for coming here today. So when you were, after the occupation, did you associate or have friendships with people who were not Jewish in Paris?
But people were not.
Yeah, did you socialize with people who were French and not Jewish?
Of course. You know, I lived in a French country. I was born in Paris. I was a French girl. In fact, I still consider myself an old Parisian girl, if you don't mind.
But after the occupation, then, what did the local
most
people...
Most people were good. But you know, I don't judge people because I think people can be led by the nose so easily. It's in human nature, unless they're taught from childhood to stand up and have the courage to stand up. But most people, I hate to say it, but they can be led.
And did they apologize afterwards? Or did they say they were sorry for not helping more? Or,
I don't know.
not really?
I don't know if they were sorry. I know somebody told me that I had a neighbor on the same floor where I lived in my apartment building who had done everything she could to get me arrested. She could have the apartment. And I used to play with her little girl. We were little girls playing together. You know, some people are really rotten, come to think of. Huh? When you think about it? Yeah, that was... But there were more good people who helped me survive, you know.
Okay, we have a question over here on the left.
Yeah?
Can you talk about how German people were treated in France after the occupation ended, or even, in your childhood post World War I, there may have been anti-German sentiment then too.
The German people?
Yeah, so after the war, how were the German people treated in Paris?
Well, I don't know of any German person who was persecuted or anything. What I did see that it really made me feel very sad, there were girls who had gone with the Germans during the occupation, and I've never been one to judge, because I figured if they were hungry enough that they want to go to bed with, but they were caught after the liberation, and one day I was going back to my apartment on Ile Saint-Louis, and they had caught two of those girls. They had shaved their heads and put a big swastika, painted a swastika on their skull, and that broke my heart. I thought that kind of cruelty, even if they had gone to bed with Germans, I'm not to judge. Who knows? So there was some cruelty from the French side too after the liberation.
Thank you for coming today, but I was wondering, when you talked about families being deported, were you talking about they were deported to Auschwitz, or you have used the word deported for families?
All family, yeah.
Was that because they were taken and put in Auschwitz? Deported, when you use that?
Yeah.
Okay.
My father, I think I told you, a man came back and told me that my father died right away, which was some kind of a consolation. But yeah, a lot of them died standing up in the cattle car before going to Auschwitz.
So they used the word deported so that people wouldn't understand really what was happening. If you say deported, it sounds like you're being relocated, from Edina to St. Paul. And people thought, okay, that's not so bad. They're going to their own area. So they used that word. But yes, whenever they said deported, it was deported to a concentration camp. France had several concentration camps.
And it was the French who took my father.
Right. The
Two
French
Frenchmen.
were, yes.
Two Frenchmen.
The French government were working in cooperation.
That's why I call them bastards.
Right.
They took my father out of his sick bed. He was sick in bed with his stomach ulcers. Oh, God.
So at one time, it didn't matter whether you were a French citizen or not a French citizen. If you were a Jewish person in France, that's all that mattered.
It was not a good idea to be born Jewish.
So France rounded up. So France rounded up just all of the Jews in a French concentration, and then moved them over, many of them, to the German concentration camps.
They took businesses away from Jewish people and gave them to. Oh my! You know what broke my heart? I heard my friend from Paris told me that there was a shop on Ile Saint-Louis, my former neighborhood in Paris, that apparently was run by a Jewish family or something, and somebody went during the night probably, and wrote Juden in German oh my God, that just went like a knife in my chest when I heard that. Can you imagine that there's still people like that in Paris who I just can't, my head cannot.
I was curious whether you shared your experience with your children as they were growing up as young people, or you waited till they were older to talk to them about some of the terrible things that you had seen and experienced.
Well,
Well, don't you remember? You didn't tell us that we were Jewish until I was about 10 or something.
My children.
Oh, I'll stand up. Hi, folks. Hello.
This is my wonderful son, Paul.
So why don't you take that answer?
She didn't tell us that we were Jewish until I was about 10 years old or something like that.
Yeah. I went in a period of, I'm not the only one. I feel guilty, and yet I'm not the only one. People like me have gone through a long period of not thinking, not denying, just not thinking. I don't know why. I feel guilty about it. I feel really guilty, and yet I know I wasn't the only one. I think it's a normal thing when you've been going through years of persecution and fear and everything. You just want to blot it out. I wanted to have fun. I went to an American Red Cross club to dance with my wonderful GIs. Oh, I love those GIs. Oh, I love them. In fact, I married a former GI. I didn't know him. I didn't know him in Paris, but I knew him.
So, by the way, so people should know it was common in the 60s and 70s for a lot of Jewish people who had either been in concentration camps, been invisibles, not to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
There were the horrors that they went through. They didn't want to impart those horrors onto their children or their grandchildren. It's only been, I would say, maybe the last 20 years where people have started talking about it. And now you have the websites where the stories can go up and you can see them. Edina now has 9 years of videos of Holocaust survivors that they tend to put up in April. I'm not sure this year, but we do it.
I don't know whether we want to block it out or
but
something.
now we don't. And so now they do tell the people. And I am also a survivor. My family is a survivor. Yes. And so my dad is from Berlin, and they were one of the invisibles in Berlin. They walked around with different names and blonde hair, and they survived. So I know what it's like to be an immigrant. I know what it's like for families not to tell about it. The horrors, and many of my families saw their family killed in the streets. So not something you want to tell a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, but eventually it comes out. And my girls know where we come from, and they know what it's like to be an immigrant and coming from Germany. It's important that we all know about that. Sorry.
In fact, it's funny, my own children didn't know until I took my daughter to see Fiddler on the Roof one time when they were in St. Paul, you know, the troops that came to St. Paul. And after the show, we sat in the car. I don't know why I didn't take you, I just took Denise. But I don't know, I just had my daughter with me. And all of a sudden, sitting at the wheel of my car, I put my head down, I started to sob from the show, from Fiddler on the Roof. And my poor daughter, so I emptied my bag to her, and after that probably, but Denise was the first one who heard.
Yes, I think you told her on the way home from the show,
Yeah.
and then we had a discussion when you got home
that's
from the
probably
plane.
the way it happened.
I didn't get to see the show for many years. But I loved it when I did see it finally.
Yeah. But were you shocked? Were you shocked when you found out?
Oh, he wants them. Yeah, I was surprised.
Not shocked?
No,
Not angry?
I didn't. But I never thought about that kind of stuff. I'm also Irish, and I'm part American Indian, and a lot of different things.
Side. Yeah.
Yeah, my father was from St. Paul. Matamidi. Yes, he was. He was a GI, but she didn't meet him over there. She met him here in St. Paul.
Yeah.
Dancing,
in
yes.
I met him in Matamidi. Yeah.
And he came up to her, and his big opening line was, "Oh, I would like to learn to speak French. Can you learn to?" And that was his thing, right?
That was it.
That's how he broke the ice.
And as soon as I met my husband, I didn't fall in love with him right away, but immediately I thought, this is going to be my best friend. And it turned out that my husband, may he rest in peace, was my very best friend. I always tell young people, when you decide to marry, be sure that you marry your best friend.
We have
For life, it's important.
We have a few more minutes for questions, if anyone else has any other questions.
Oh, yeah, don't hesitate. Oh, I like it when they ask questions. Can you stand up? Maybe I'll hear you better.
Can you hear me? Oh, 1, 2, 3.
We're going to try.
Okay.
Yeah, tell me what he said. I cannot hear.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. I had somewhat similar experience than you did, except in occupied Poland. And I would like to mention that when you were talking about people being deported, my uncle somehow survived in Switzerland.
Yeah.
So he corresponded with my grandparents, his parents, who were in a ghetto in Poland. And, you know, everything had to be, the Germans stuck to the order muss sein. So at one point, you know, he was corresponding with his parents, and at one point he sent a letter to Poland, and it came back with an annotation in German, umgesiedelt, wohin unbekannt, which means relocated where to unknown. And that's where they were sent to a death camp.
What did he say?
So
He's talking about the Germans relocating people. But he's telling about his story.
thank you for your talk.
Thank you so much for telling us your story. Thank you.
Yeah, but you know, one thing I want, ask me. What do you have to ask?
Can she stand up, by the way?
Oh, cute little girl. Look at that cute little girl. Oh, you cutie. Look at the dimples she has. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, you're so cute. What's your name? What's your first name?
Lily.
Huh?
Lily.
Oh, oh, you're adorable. Oh. Where are your parents?
Oh, they're back there.
Well, they must be proud of you. Huh? Ask me anything.
I go to the 4th grade French school, and what was it like when you were in 4th grade?
You know, I cannot hear.
What was it like when you were in 4th grade? 4th or 5th grade? What was school like? She goes to the French school and she's in 4th grade?
When Paris, oh my goodness. Gee. You're talking about prehistoric age.
Did you put on plays?
Oh, in my school, yes, we did. In my lycée, which is secondary school, we didn't have much. But for each other, for our birthdays, especially during the occupation when we had nothing, we'd put on plays for each other, for one another. Yeah, I thought of that. Do you do that too in your school?
Not really.
Oh. We did. We had simple pleasures, you know, because we were not allowed to go to movies, theaters. So we'd put on plays for one another for our birthdays. That's what we did.
How else did you keep the culture alive?
Okay, that lady over there.
When you ask the culture, what are you talking about? But French culture, Jewish culture? Okay, so I'm going to rephrase it so everyone can hear it. She's asking Louise, how did she keep the Jewish culture alive during the occupation? So how did you remain Jewish in a sense?
Well, I never thought of myself as Jewish, to tell you the truth, because I was brought up in a home where we did not practice Judaism. For the high holidays, I remember my mother would buy matzah, you know, is that what you call
The matzah?
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. That was good to eat. But otherwise, I was not brought up in any. In fact, it was in this country, not maybe 2 years ago, I was invited to a seder, and I'd never gone to one in my life, and I started to cry. All of a sudden, it was visceral, you know, something came up. I thought of hundreds of years, or the people I came from, who had been persecuted and suffered, and still, the Jews have contributed to the welfare of humanity over the years, doctors especially. Somewhere at home I have a paper with names of Jewish doctors who have invented remedies or something to save humanity, including me. I had TB. My mother died of TB, you know, so when I came to this country, before I did my practice teaching to be a teacher, they found out that I had active TB. Oh, that was catastrophic. I ended up in Iker Hospital for 19 months 1 year as a strict bed patient, and and fortunately, streptomycin came along, that and then pneumo saved my life. And I read in that paper a friend of mine gave me, the doctor who invented or created a vaccine or something against TB was a good old Jewish doctor. So happened.
I want to have everyone just we want to thank Louise for being here, by the way.
Oh,
thank you
it was
so
my
much.
pleasure. Thank you. Oh, I'm standing up for you. God bless you all. Oh, I think you're wonderful people. You're just the most wonderful. Oh, I love you, really. I mean it. I'm not being corny or funny or cute. I mean it. You are, oh, look who's here. Oh my God, I didn't see you there all this time. That's my name.
Louise will be outside if anyone wants to talk to her and has any questions.
My little,
I also...
My little what?
Well, these are students, so some of Louise's students are here from when she taught French, by the way. So these are two of her students.
I didn't see you all this time.
So I did want to thank...
I love her. She was my pride and joy, that girl there.
I wanted to thank the mayor for coming and for helping us out.
Thank you.
And Henning, I wanted to thank Professor from the university for coming also and providing the history. Thank you for coming.